I was having severe hip pain. I was playing water polo in high school and I was getting out of the pool every day crying in pain. Like my hips were hurting so bad. I started going to the doctor, x-rays, this, that. They basically told me that the ball and socket, like the ball in my hip was too large for the socket, and that's what was causing pain. They sent me to physical therapy. I did 13 and a half weeks of physical therapy, and I think I was in more pain after it than I ever felt like any relief from it. And so I finally went to another doctor. They were basically saying the only option was to do hip surgery because the ball and socket was too large and physical therapy wasn't working. And my dad was like, my parents were like, absolutely not. You're 14 years old. Like, you're not having hip surgery at 14. Like, that's ridiculous. It was very different. I mean, you definitely, obviously, coming in with hip pain, look at the hips. But then I think what separated from what I was used to is like looking at other aspects of my body and how they connect and work together. And, you kind of went through what is your history with injuries in the past. And by going through that, I talked about I had ankle injuries, I'd broken one foot, tore ligaments in another foot, like took a look at that and kind of the whole picture rather than just like, hey, your hip hurts, let's look at your hip. It was, oh, you've had these other injuries, and then kind of going down that road, like how I was compensating for those injuries, which was causing hip pain. Yes, I probably do have a structural issue with my hip, but like how those other things are affecting it or making it worse, because you don't just one day have hip pain if it's actually a structural issue, right? Like, it doesn't just start one day randomly and that's the problem. Like, you put the block of wood and had my ankles like taken out of the equation. So I think you had me like squat down just normal, do a squat, and how bad my hips hurt, and standing on a board like taking my ankles out of the equation and had me do it again, and it was like a whole different movement, way less pain. And I was kind of like, I mean, at first obviously not knowing what I was just like, okay, cool. But I didn't know like what that meant, in the fact that like you took my ankles out of the equation and I wasn't feeling pain. And it was like, oh, that's the problem. Like, the big thing my dad always told me is like, make sure you're doing them as often as he's telling you, do them those 3-4 times a day when you're supposed to. Because if you're not doing them, it's not going to work. You can't say, oh, it didn't work and you did it one time in 6 weeks or something like that, So do them as often as he's telling you. And I think within like 3 to 4 days, I was definitely feeling a huge difference. And then I'd say between 3 and 4 weeks, I like was completely pain-free, couldn't even remember that it happened. Definitely think overall, like, just that awareness of like, hey, it's not always this, wherever your pain is, that's not always the issue. You got to look at it from like a bigger sense and build muscles and help your whole body, because you compensate a lot. And I didn't really realize how much my ankles were compensating. If you are injured, have those issues, like, first of all, get that second opinion before you go down like a road. Because had my parents not gotten the opinion of you, my dad hadn't reached out and said like, help, like, we didn't have another option. Surgery was what they were telling us, these doctors were telling us to do. So I mean, I would always say like a second opinion, and like do your own research, do your own stuff, because like you said, a physical therapist at a doctor's is only going to follow what the script says. They said hip pain, they're focusing on my hips. They're not looking at that full body. So like advocating for yourself, getting that second opinion, and like then when you do have those tools that work, like continue to use them. Don't think just because my injury's over, I'm not in pain anymore. Like, my ankles are good, my hip's good, I don't need to do anything ever again. It's like, no, that's something you have to foster even for areas that you're not in pain.